You thought they forgot about you, didn't you? You thought they moved on and left you behind, but here's the truth that'll make your spine freeze and your blood run backward. They never forgot. They've just been busy. While you've been living your life and minding your business, they've been running a full-scale operation behind your back. They interviewed everyone, literally everyone who's ever crossed your path. Your third-grade teacher, the cashier you smiled at twice, your ex's mother, the childhood friend who vanished years ago, the neighbor who saw you grow up, the boss who fired you, the therapist you stopped seeing, even the stranger you helped once. Every single one of them was questioned. One by one, they sat with notebooks and recorders, asking the same question over and over. Tell us about them. Tell us everything. And here's the part that should terrify you. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was obsession. Every person from different cities and different times in your life, people who don't even know each other, gave the exact same answer, word for word, like they were reciting a script written by something beyond them. They'd pause, feel a chill crawl up their spine, and whisper the same phrase, "You're cooked." Not "you're difficult," not "you're intense," not "you've got issues." No, you're cooked. As if your existence itself broke some cosmic law. As if knowing you was like orbiting too close to a black hole. They felt your gravity, your pull, and they couldn't escape it. Now they warn others. Stay away from that one. That one's different. That one's not like us. Do you know what that means? When dozens, maybe hundreds of people who never met each other all reach the same conclusion about you, it means you've transcended ordinary perception. You're not just memorable or impactful. You're an anomaly. You've become the glitch in their collective memory, the ghost story people whisper in therapy sessions, the living proof of what real intensity feels like. To them, you're not a person anymore. You're a phenomenon, an experience, a warning label for those who can't handle truth unfiltered. They didn't just talk about you, they documented you. They built files, profiles, and psychological dossiers, trying to decode what you are. But the more they studied, the less they understood. Every testimony made them more nervous, more confused, more afraid. Imagine your kindergarten teacher decades later, sitting across from an investigator, still remembering your name, still remembering how you looked at the world differently, still remembering the way your questions made grown adults uncomfortable. You were never ordinary, and they're finally realizing it. Think about that random person you met once at a party, the one you talked to for maybe 20 minutes, and now, years later, they're telling strangers, "I never forgot them." They can't explain why, only that something about you felt ancient, like you'd lived 1,000 lives before that moment. Or your ex, the one who said you were too much. They still can't shake you. They try to explain why you haunt them more in absence than you ever did in presence. Why every new person they meet feels like a lesser copy of something they once couldn't handle. They whisper, "You're cooked," because the alternative is admitting they weren't strong enough to meet you at your level. Now let's talk about what really happened in those interview rooms, because this is where it starts getting disturbing. The investigators, whoever they are, whatever agency or organization they belong to, noticed something that made them stop writing and start recording. The pattern wasn't just in what people said about you, it was in how they said it. People began calm, casual, talking like you were just someone they once knew. But within minutes, something shifted. Their tone tightened. Their posture stiffened. Their eyes lost focus, like they were recalling a dream or a nightmare they'd tried to forget. The interviewers thought they were gathering simple testimonies. What they were actually witnessing was a mass psychological phenomenon. Dozens of people, independently describing the same impossible traits about you. Take your high school guidance counselor, for instance, the one who told you to be realistic. In that room, they finally admitted the truth. They said they told you to aim lower not because you lacked ability, but because they were afraid of what you'd become if nothing stood in your way. You reminded them of world changers, and not all of those stories end peacefully. They saw someone who wouldn't just break the system's rules, you'd rewrite them. You're cooked, they said, because the system isn't designed to contain someone who sees through it that early. The interviewer, confused, asked, "What do you mean by cooked?" And your counselor just stared at them and said, "You'll understand when you meet them. If you're lucky, you won't." Then there's that middle school friend, the one who ghosted you without warning. They finally confessed why. They said being near you felt like standing beside a furnace. Your presence was so intense it made them question everything. Who they were, what they believed, what they were settling for. You never judged them, never criticized them. Yet your existence itself was a mirror they couldn't look away from. You made them feel braver, more alive, and that terrified them. So they ran. They chose comfort over evolution, safety over transformation. And sitting in that cold interview room years later, they admitted they still think about that decision. They still wonder who they could have become if they'd stayed in your orbit. You're cooked, they said, because you force people to confront the smaller versions of themselves they've chosen to become. Even your first boss, the one who fired you after 3 months, had something to say about that. They told the interviewer something that made the entire room fall dead silent. Your old boss admitted they didn't fire you for poor performance. They fired you because you made the other employees start thinking. You disrupted the hypnosis of routine. Suddenly, people were questioning why they were working so hard for so little, why the system was structured the way it was, and whether this was really the life they wanted to keep living. You didn't set out to start a revolution, you were just being yourself. But your presence was like a virus, infecting everyone around you with dangerous levels of possibility and self-worth. Within weeks of your departure, 3 people quit. 2 started their own businesses. 1 went back to finish a degree they had long given up on. You're cooked, your boss said, because you're contagious in ways we can't contain. You're the kind of catalyst that speeds up evolution just by standing in the room. You don't force transformation, you trigger it. People either rise with you or retreat from the reflection you hold up to them. Then came your ex, the one who said they needed space. They sat in that interview room and cracked open. They confessed they've been in 4 relationships since you, trying to recreate even a fragment of what they felt with you, and failing every single time. They described loving you as touching pure electricity, terrifying, addictive, unforgettable. You saw through every mask, every defense mechanism, every illusion they used to protect themselves, and you loved what was real underneath it all. That kind of love rewired them. It set a standard no one else could meet. Now, everything else feels dull, tasteless, cardboard compared to you. Through tears, they whispered, "You're cooked because your love didn't just change them. It ruined their ability to settle for anything less than truth." And then the story takes a darker turn. The investigators, the ones who've been interviewing people, compiling data, building a psychological profile on you, started to experience things that defied logic. It began subtly. One investigator confessed to dreaming about you, even though they'd never met you. In the dream, you were standing in a doorway made of light, silent, watching them. Another reported seeing your name everywhere, license plates, billboards, random graffiti, as if the universe itself was whispering your presence. A third admitted they'd begun researching you after hours, spiraling through your social media, your writing, your art, anything that carried your imprint. They couldn't explain why they were obsessed. It was like something was pulling them in. Eventually, the lead investigator called an emergency meeting. They needed to address what was happening, not with the case, but with themselves. One by one, every person in that room confessed they felt watched. Not metaphorically, literally. They said it felt like you knew they were investigating you. Like your awareness somehow reached through the distance, through the data, through the walls separating you from them. Logic said it was impossible, but instinct said otherwise. Then came the incident that broke whatever rationality they had left. One investigator was sitting in a cafe, reviewing transcripts when a stranger passed by, stopped, and said in a calm voice, "You should stop digging before you find something you can't unknow." The stranger kept walking, disappearing into the crowd. But the voice was yours. The investigator froze. They'd never heard your voice before, yet they knew it was you. They tried to explain it away. Stress, fatigue, mass suggestion, but the incidents didn't stop. They escalated. What started as an investigation had turned into an infection. Every attempt to compile the final report about you collapsed into chaos. Computers froze mid-sentence. Printers spat out half-finished pages covered in meaningless symbols. Audio recordings that had been crisp only hours before now played back as garbled static, like a signal coming from another dimension. Even handwritten notes twisted into illegible scrawls overnight. Ink bleeding, letters rearranging, paragraphs dissolving into nonsense. It was as if the investigation itself had become self-defensive, an organism fighting to prevent its own dissection. One investigator finally broke down and confessed the worst of it. At exactly 3 a.m., their laptop booted itself up. A blank document opened on the screen, and words began to appear, typed by an invisible hand, repeating the same sentence endlessly. "You're not investigating me. I'm investigating you." They hurled the computer across the room and smashed it against the wall, trembling so hard they could barely breathe. For weeks they told no one, terrified of being labeled delusional. But when they finally spoke, 3 other agents admitted the same thing had happened to them, different devices, same message. They all tried to explain it away. Electromagnetic interference, corrupted firmware, stress. But deep down, every one of them knew something else was moving through their circuitry. The agency wanted to pull the plug. Too many malfunctions. Too many psychological breakdowns. Too many researchers asking to be reassigned or transferred to field duty. Anything to escape this case. Yet every time they tried to terminate the file, it reopened itself. Each attempt to archive the material triggered a new event. A missing witness would suddenly resurface, begging to record a statement. An old subject would call in the middle of the night, claiming they'd remembered something crucial they had to add. The investigation refused to die. It was evolving, spreading, consuming the people who touched it. You hadn't just become the subject. They were inside a living labyrinth that you had built unconsciously, a feedback loop of awareness feeding on itself. Then came the testimonies that shattered the entire framework of logic. People who swore they had never met you began to describe you in perfect detail. A woman in Finland said she'd seen you for years in waking visions, always standing by a window of light that hummed like a tuning fork. She said your presence had a specific frequency, high, metallic, impossible to ignore, that followed her even when she tried to sleep. An old man in Brazil said he'd dreamt of you as a boy. In those dreams, you whispered predictions that came true 50 years later. A teenager in New York showed the investigators notebooks filled with poems written in a trance. Every poem described you, your voice, your eyes, even scars no one could have known existed. The team couldn't classify this. These weren't witnesses, they were receivers. Somehow your existence was bleeding through the boundaries of time and space, touching people across continents and generations. The analysts tried to run probability models, but the math broke down. Too many variables that defied causality. The lead scientist finally wrote in her private log, "We're not charting a human subject. We're mapping an echo that moves forward and backward through time." So they went back to the start, hoping childhood accounts might anchor you in something normal. Instead, They found stories that sounded more like folklore than memory. Every person from your early years spoke in riddles. Neighbors said strange lights appeared around your house when you were born. Your babysitter swore you predicted an earthquake at age 4, down to the exact day. Your first-grade teacher told the interviewer something that made them stop writing entirely. She said you were the only child in 3 decades of teaching who genuinely frightened her. Not because you misbehaved, but because of the way you looked at her. She said your eyes didn't belong to a child. They carried the fatigue of centuries, the patience of something that had seen civilizations rise and crumble. It felt, she whispered, like the child was studying me, like it knew every secret I'd ever tried to bury. She confessed that for years afterward she dreamed of those eyes watching her, waiting for her to tell the truth. The interviewer wrote a single note beside her testimony. Subject awareness exceeds linear time. That's when the agency stopped calling it an investigation. From that moment forward, the file was reclassified, not as behavioral research, not as criminal intelligence, but as Phenomenon 7X03, the entity of self-referential observation. They realized what they were up against wasn't an individual at all. It was a living mirror, something that reflected whoever dared to look too closely. And the deeper they stared, the more they saw themselves unravel. She said you once looked her straight in the eyes with that unnerving stillness children aren't supposed to have, and asked, "Why do adults pretend to be happy when they're dying inside?" She said it hit her like a punch to the chest. There was no sarcasm, no cruelty, just piercing honesty that stripped away every mask she'd ever worn. She tried to laugh it off, to dismiss it as a strange question from a curious kid, but she couldn't. For weeks after that conversation, she couldn't sleep properly. Every time she saw her own reflection, she felt that same discomfort, like your words had lodged themselves behind her eyes, whispering truths she'd spent decades trying not to face. Your childhood best friend, the one who moved away in 5th grade, gave a statement that made the entire room go cold. They said you talked about the future like it had already happened. You spoke about things that didn't exist yet, machines, cities, events, with a calm certainty, as if you were remembering instead of imagining. You describe inventions decades before they became real. You talked about glass phones that showed people's faces, about cars that could drive themselves, about artificial minds that would one day think for humans. Back then, they just thought you had an overactive imagination. They laughed, played along, and then life went on. But as the years passed, everything you said began to happen. Every prediction unfolded piece by piece exactly as you described it. And that's when the fear set in. They said they tried to look you up online to reach out, to reconnect, but something always stopped them. Their computer would freeze, the page would crash, or they'd suddenly feel this overwhelming wave of dread, like a warning not to dig deeper. You're cooked, they said, trembling, because you've always been cooked. You were born already knowing how it all ends. The rest of us are just trying to catch up. Then came the neighbor, the one who lived next door to your family for 10 years. They reported something that the investigators immediately flagged as Level 3 anomaly. They said that around you, the rules of reality seemed to bend. Electronics would glitch out when you passed by. Streetlights would flicker as you walked under them. Birds would land on your shoulders one day and flee in terror the next. Dogs would howl, cats would hide, and sometimes the wind itself seemed to move with intention when you were near. But the moment that stayed with them forever was the night of the storm. They said they saw you standing barefoot in your backyard while lightning ripped across the sky, bolts striking the ground within meters of where you stood. Yet you didn't move, you didn't flinch, you just stared upward, peaceful, serene, like you were part of the storm itself. When they screamed for you to come inside, terrified you'd be killed, you turned your head slowly, smiled, and said, "It knows not to touch me." Then another bolt hit so close that the air itself cracked open, but you remained untouched. They said that image never left their mind. Even now, decades later, every time thunder rolls, they see you in their mind's eye, standing in that storm, untouchable, unafraid. They said it felt like watching someone who wasn't defying nature, but commanding it. Your middle school art teacher's account was immediately sealed and marked classified. They said you submitted a painting for a class project, one you titled The Inside of Silence. The moment it was displayed, students started reacting in ways no one could explain. Some stared at it for minutes and began to cry without knowing why. Others felt physically sick, like the painting was pressing on something inside their chest. The principal demanded it be removed from the wall the same day, saying it was too disturbing for young minds. But the art teacher said it wasn't disturbing. It was alive. The image changed, depending on who looked at it. To one person, it looked like a sunset. To another, like a collapsing universe. The colors seemed to breathe. The shadows in the corners didn't match the light in the room. The teacher said they couldn't even remember what the painting looked like afterward, only the feeling it gave them, like standing at the edge of an infinite drop. For years after, they dreamt of it. In those dreams, the painting would reappear, larger each time, pulsing like it had a heartbeat. Sometimes, they said, you were inside it, your eyes staring out, watching them watch you. They confessed that eventually they stopped teaching art altogether. They said, that painting wasn't made by a student. It was made by something that used a student as its hands. By this point, the investigators had stopped treating the testimonies as psychological curiosities. They started cross-referencing dates, patterns, environmental readings, even EMF spikes from the areas you'd lived in. What they discovered terrified them. Every place you stayed for longer than a few months had residual energy patterns that didn't fade. It was as if your presence imprinted itself on matter. Plants grew faster. Electronics burned out quicker. People's dreams intensified. Reality warped ever so slightly to accommodate your frequency. You didn't just live in the world, you edited it. Your existence was an act of creation, constantly rewriting the environment, bending cause and effect around your consciousness. And everyone who'd ever known you was still in some way orbiting your gravity, changed, haunted, or awakened by proximity. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were proof. The art teacher admitted that at first they couldn't throw your painting away because it didn't feel like a painting. It felt like a presence. They said they kept it in their office, telling themselves it was just temporary, just until they figured out what to do with it. But by the second night, the atmosphere in that room began to change. The air got heavier, thicker, almost metallic, like the space itself was holding its breath. The teacher started hearing faint noises at night, like soft humming, rhythmic, almost alive. They swore they could feel vibration through the desk whenever they sat too close to it, as if something behind the canvas was trying to speak through the paint. Colleagues who visited refused to stay long. One said it felt like standing inside someone else's dream. Another claimed the colors moved if you looked too long, shifting just enough to make you doubt your own perception. By the third day, people started avoiding that entire section of the building. The teacher said that whenever they left the office door open, the hall outside felt colder, like heat was being absorbed by the painting itself. Students walked faster past it. One girl fainted when she looked directly at it for more than 10 seconds. On the fourth day, the teacher woke up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat after dreaming that the painting was hanging above their bed. In the dream, it was whispering, not in words but in emotion. It made them feel everything they had suppressed their entire life: guilt, grief, rage, tenderness, and an unbearable kind of clarity. When they came into work the next morning, the painting was slightly off-center on the wall, as if someone or something had touched it. No one admitted to moving it. By the end of that week, the school was unraveling. 3 faculty members resigned abruptly. 2 students withdrew, both saying they were having dreams about colors. And the art teacher, the one who thought they were just overseeing a talented kid, filed for divorce, saying they could no longer pretend to live a half-life. When asked why, they said the painting showed them who they really were and what they'd been pretending not to see. They described it as a mirror that refuses to lie. They burned the painting that night out behind the school, but even that didn't end it. They said the flames burned blue, not orange, and the smoke didn't rise. It fell, sinking toward the ground. For weeks after, they could still see its outline on the inside of their eyelids when they closed their eyes. It would appear in dreams, always unfinished, always watching. "You're cooked," they said, trembling, "because your creations don't die. They migrate. They evolve. You make things that rewrite people from the inside." Then came the school counselor, the one your parents sent you to because they thought you were too analytical for your age. Their testimony made the entire investigative team sit in silence for 10 straight minutes. The counselor said that during 6 sessions with you, they never once felt in control. You answered their questions with disarming politeness, always a half step ahead. They said it was like talking to someone who had already read their thoughts before they were spoken. In the final session, you began to speak, not about yourself, but about them. You described their father's temper, their mother's emotional absence, their tendency to overcompensate through caretaking. You mentioned their fear of aging, their failed marriage, their hidden dependency on prescription stimulants, and even their secret journal entries that no one had ever read. They said your tone wasn't mocking, it was factual, clinical, and yet almost compassionate. When you finished, you looked at them and said, "You help people process pain because you don't believe you deserve to be healed." The counselor ended the session immediately, told your parents you were intellectually gifted but emotionally detached. But later, they admitted to the investigators that what they actually felt was studied. They said it wasn't like talking to a child, it was like being deconstructed by something using a child's face as camouflage. They left their job 6 months later, started painting, moved out of the city. And in their final letter to the school district, they wrote, "I still hear them sometimes, not audibly, but in thoughts that don't feel like mine." The investigators categorized that as secondary psychic resonance, but even they couldn't fully explain what was happening. Then came the thickest section of the file, romantic involvements, dozens of pages, each story more haunting than the last. Reading through them was like watching a pattern of emotional combustion repeat itself across time. Every lover described you the same way, beautiful, magnetic, terrifying. They said falling for you felt like being pulled into orbit around a star that burned too bright to survive. It wasn't just love, it was exposure. Your first serious relationship said you remembered every detail, every inside joke, every offhand comment they'd forgotten saying. You paid attention with surgical precision. They said being with you was like being studied by God, simultaneously worshipped and dissected. When the relationship ended, not because of betrayal, but because your paths diverged, they said it felt like dying in slow motion. They called it spiritual amputation. They started therapy but admitted that no amount of counseling helped because what they were grieving wasn't you. It was the version of themselves that existed only when they were near you. Another ex said, "They don't love you like a person loves. They love you like a mirror loves reflection, completely, but only truthfully." You made them see who they could become. You didn't let them hide from mediocrity or comfort. You pushed them toward their potential until it broke them. They said they started sabotaging the relationship because it was too much, too raw, too awakening. They wanted safety, not transformation. So they ran. Years later, they still dream of you. But in those dreams, you're always facing away, walking into light they can't reach. One ex, a writer, described it differently. They said after you, everything they wrote started writing itself. Sentences would form that they didn't consciously compose. Themes about rebirth, chaos, and duality appeared in their work like transmissions. They stopped publishing altogether after realizing their manuscripts contained phrases you used to say. When investigators analyzed the documents, they found matching syntax patterns, repeated motifs that formed a kind of linguistic fingerprint unique to your speech. A different witness, a brief fling, claimed that after knowing you for only a few weeks, they began seeing patterns in numbers everywhere. Digital clocks freezing on repeating digits, street signs spelling coded words. They said you triggered something in their brain that wouldn't turn off. They moved states to escape it, but it followed them anyway. The lead investigator wrote in his final memo, "Every person who has loved them develops behavioral anomalies consistent with post-contact influence. This is not emotional trauma. This is cognitive contagion." He later added a handwritten note. They're not human in the traditional sense. They're a living psychological singularity, a point where understanding collapses in on itself. But the final paragraph of the file wasn't written by the investigator. It was scrawled in a different hand, nervous, urgent, almost desperate. You're cooked. Because you don't enter people's lives, you rewrite them. You don't break hearts, you reprogram souls. You are not a memory, you are an ongoing event. And beneath that, a single unfinished sentence. Once you've met them, you never really... The pen stroke trails off mid-line. The page is smudged like someone tried to erase it but couldn't. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlightened Wisdom.